Hello everyone, Marius here, surrounded by my colleagues Chris and Jaffa. London Property Podcast, episode 27. We are back, and gosh, it's been crazy 3 weeks after the budget.
Yeah.
Lots of activity, lots to talk about. We're going to try and condense it within 15 minutes. Right, Chris, tell us about what's been happening around, Central, Hyde Park and the surrounding areas.
Central, I think on the outskirts it's kicked off a lot kind of sooner than Central have.
Yeah.
I mean, I've only really felt things significantly pick up over the past week, really, in terms of offers being delivered at levels that just previously were unattainable to get. And I've got two examples. Capital value on a flat that was on the market at 595. The buyer unfortunately pulled out. This was agreed at the end of last year, around about November time. Buyer's just withdrawn, and it's gone back on the market for £10,000 more. And it's immediately, we've had 8 viewings, 2 lots of kind of 4 staggers, because we can't do open houses. And it's gone for 25 grand more than what it was previously under offer at. And consider the fact that we had that property on the market for probably 3 months last year. Yeah. And really, that was the best we could achieve. It was 20 grand less. Yeah. And immediately, the first person through the door has offered so much more.
Amazing.
Communal gardens, front and back. Nice property, but it is a flat in a conversion. And then we've had another property, which is a house in Marylebone. Similar situation. It was on the market for about 4 months. Got agreed after a long time of negotiating and everything else. The contract was pulled away from the buyer because they were kind of trying to chip on the price. Went back on the market for a day. It's gone for £90,000 more, and it went to multiple bids. So that's what's been happening this week in the office, which is it's not happening for every property. So I don't want to kind of make everyone feel like they're just going to get absolutely. Yeah. But for the good quality things that were already under offer, I think people who did secure something at the end of last year, who were thinking the market's still not good, if that goes back on the market, there's a chance that you know what I mean, the market's moved on from that.
Yeah. And Jaffa, from your perspective, looking at the deals and development projects, I mean, I guess you're finding it quite competitive because of these domestic owners.
Exactly. I mean, from what we've seen, look, transaction levels are very high at the moment, but at the same time, the supply of new properties coming on the market just seems to be non-existent. I mean, we're not seeing much come on at all. I mean, we're showing figures from HMRC. They've said transactions are at 122,800, which is the highest it's been in February, and it's 48% higher than it was this time last year, and it's actually the highest it's been in 15 years. So you can tell there are deals happening, but just in terms of new deal flow, it's just been so slow, and it's just been across the board. I mean, we're always looking across all of prime central London. And yesterday was a day where I called most of the agents and see what's new and what's coming on, and it was literally across the board. There aren't many new projects or properties coming on.
How many agents did you call?
Yesterday I called 44 new agents.
You probably heard from me.
You probably heard my voice. 44 agents yesterday, and it was the same news across the board.
No stock levels.
Stock levels are all-time low. There's there are instructions potentially coming on down the line. But I think me and Marius were speaking just before the podcast saying, everything that's happened now was as a result of people probably holding on to see what was in the budget, and now possibly releasing new stock on coming, now that they know what they've got some certainty with the budget going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's also this distinction to be made between, because you're looking for probates, refurbishment projects.
Exactly.
From my perspective, I deal with a lot of owner-occupiers who are selling the property to maybe move to the country or buy a bigger house. In terms of instructions anyway, for W9 and kind of Little Venice, Maidavale, this region, we've been very busy with new instructions because people are really motivated to buy their onward, and you've got until the summer effectively to do. A lot of them don't care about the price, the stamp duty holiday. So when you're looking, I completely agree, we don't really have a lot of probates or refurbishment projects where you can add value. So in that perspective, you probably will find that stock is pretty low, but I think certain areas, especially now that people have seen the budget, you get quite a lot of motivated sellers, like really wanting to make
Yeah.
a move, putting the property on the market. But those are, like I said, owner occupiers. It's
Yeah.
properties that are already kind of done up, and it's going to be an owner occupier end
Yeah.
user who's going to buy this property. So there is a bit of distinction there,
Yeah.
because you've got two separate things.
Correct.
I completely agree. Very rarely, you know, I think I've sent you 2 or 3 properties in
Yeah.
the last 2 months, and
So-
there isn't, you know, and they're
They've all
gone.
gone to
And they're very
And
competitive.
they've gone both of them to end users
On
or
seal builds as
yeah,
well.
exactly,
On
on
multiple
seal bids.
bids,
So that's you know, you do get quite a lot of competition, and like Jeff said, in terms of refurb, probates, projects that you can add value to, it's very few and far between.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting. But yeah, let's see. So we're back, and what it is important to mention when it comes to obviously, you know, competitive bids
Yeah.
between buyers, but also the lack or supply of listings, is the fact that you've got different demographics in different areas of central London.
Definitely.
Okay, so where I'm working, there's a lot of domestic buyers, a lot of young families moving into the area.
Yeah.
They want to be close to central London. Whereas I think if you go towards Hyde Park, Mayfair, a lot of those buyers and sellers are completely different demographics, right? A lot of them, it's an asset, a trophy asset,
Yeah.
cash purchase. They're happily to sit on the property. They don't really need to sell, you know. So it's quite
They're
interesting.
not selling to move to the country either.
Yeah.
They're probably most likely abroad. Like
Yeah.
90% of the stock in W2 where I'm sat,
Yeah,
it's their second homes, and they're
Yeah.
not even in the UK.
yeah,
So the whole motivation to move to Surrey or somewhere else, it's not even there.
Yeah.
They're not going to move. So you'll hear a lot of different market kind of commentary between myself and Marius, even though we're only a mile in terms of where
very
the offices are.
different. Yeah,
You were saying 60% of your clients are kind of local.
yeah,
So
domestic, you
much
know.
more busy that market than my market.
Yeah.
So, and it is a London property podcast, so we need to kind of, you know, there's a lot of
Yes.
different
Yeah,
markets.
it's very. It's just the pure example of micro markets,
Yeah,
right? Because you
for
go
sure.
1 mile that way and it's
Yeah.
completely different.
like-
you go 1 mile that
Yeah.
way or half a mile, and it's a completed
Yeah.
demographic, and it just shows
Yeah.
how London, you
Yeah.
know, is so different.
Even when you look at, like, you break it down and you like from my side, obviously I'm like spread across the whole
Yes.
of prime central London, so even when you go to say Knightsbridge is really struggling,
yeah,
but when you break it down into 1 to 2 beds, they're really struggling. But when you go to 3 beds plus and
the
houses,
big trophy
they're really
assets,
kind of
yeah.
there are still transactions happening, and they're okay on that front. And again, when you go to Chelsea, it's the same thing again. So yeah, I think when you break it down into micro markets and then again break it
And
down
price
into
brackets as
and
well.
price
Was
brackets.
There was a research I read last week. I don't know if you guys saw it. Basically, 5 million plus transactions in prime central London were the highest number last year compared to, I think, 2019.
Yes.
Again, just the evidence that, like you said, you can have a price bracket in a specific postcode who could be, you know, might be struggling.
Yes.
But then you've got the trophy assets where you've got a lot of domestic buyers, and that's without the international buyers in the market as well.
Yeah.
You've had the domestic buyers actually
Step it up.
Yeah,
Step it up, yeah,
exactly.
the
So
re-
not even the location; it's even price ranges that can differ. So
Yeah.
very, very interesting.
I was going to ask a question because you guys are on the ground. I've noticed speaking to a lot of the agents, which I speak to regularly.
Yeah.
The situation has been that there's been properties that are on the market that weren't attracting that much attention, but given stock levels are low, they have actually started noticing that, you know, those are now becoming going under offer. Have you guys noticed that at all?
We've had that. There's a couple of listings that we've got that have been on the market for a long time, such as Albert Hall Mansions, for example,
Right.
been under offer 3-4 times. All of a sudden, we've had loads of inquiries on that.
Yeah.
And another property that I would have thought we'd never normally have inquiries from, Gloucester Place,
Yes.
a big kind of ground and lower at 4.5. There's activity on that. There's 3
Yeah.
or 4 inquiries on it that otherwise there just
You
wouldn't
wouldn't
be.
have, yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
quite surprising, really. So
Yeah.
yeah, we're noticing the same thing.
But I'm guessing, Marius, because obviously you're much more of a different demographic.
Yeah.
Are you finding that as well, or not really? Or everything's flying off the shelf with you at the moment.
I can say that. No, not everything. Like I said, the mainstream lower end of the market up to 500, 600. Even we had a bit of activity after the budget because I
Yes.
think a lot of first time buyers were like, "Oh, I need to buy now."
Yes.
And then it fizzled out. Honestly, it's really weird. This week, in terms of the lower end stuff, below 650, it's very, very quiet. It was
Yeah.
literally the week and a half. But in terms of a million plus market, yeah, it's like crazy, and you do
Yeah.
get inquiries for stuff that previously was rather stagnant. So
I do think that transaction level will really carry on going. You know,
it will carry on?
I do think it'll carry on because
after stamp duty gets tapered out and withdrawn.
Exactly. I think you'll find what we found. Yeah. I think you'll find what we found in February, that the transaction levels were at 15-year high. I think that, you know, that's mainly because whoever was doing it, those people were trying to push their transactions through before they knew the budget was coming and before they knew that the stamp duty was going to get extended.
Yeah.
So I do think that now is going to continue, and probably in June you'll find a similar kind of, you know, a spike. Exactly.
Yeah.
But going into the autumn, do you think it'll carry on, or do you think it'll take off a little bit?
From research I've seen and forecasts, I think it will have a slight dip in terms of the hype once the stamp duty ends. But then if you look at other fundamentals towards the end of the year, the fact that potentially international travel will be allowed, I think it will be a stronger end to the year, because the reality is COVID has actually changed people's lifestyle in terms of their desire for outside space, bigger, inside space, etc. And I think that will still be there. Factor that in with, the fact that people have saved money, all those things that we discussed 3 weeks ago, the fundamentals. And I think towards the end of last year, it won't be as overhyped as it is, and there won't be a massive gold rush. But I still think it'll be busy, and I think the domestic market, and if you bring in the international market again, it will just continue that momentum. But to a different, at a different speed. There's not going to be that rush and hype, and everyone being super hyper energetic about it. Everyone's like absolutely crazy right now. It is literally like, it
is manic at the moment,
and it's I think it'll be very serious buyers. There are people that have been looking, they know what they want, they've got the cash ready, or they've sold their property and they're looking to make that move because of a lifestyle change more than anything. So I think it'll still be a good, I think 2021, I've said it from
I think
the
so
onset,
as well. I really
it's going to be a good year, but there will be spikes like we've had in the last 2 weeks. There'll be a massive spike towards June. It'll come down, but if you look at the levels, it'll still be amazing considering we're a year after all this COVID situation.
I think COVID has really shown us again and again that how resilient the prime central London property market is. Absolutely. Because I think despite everything that's happened, you've got Brexit, you've got COVID, you've got various other factors, taxation rules that have come in, which is again something we should touch on before this podcast finishes. It's shown again and again how resilient it is. Everyone expected it to dip. I think we mentioned that a few times. We expected it to dip, and it hasn't. And reality is transaction levels are ridiculously high, and we're all moving forward, doing really well.
I think
I think we're coming off a low base as well. Like within kind of zone 1 and 2, we're coming off a relatively low base, which helps. Now, this is the London Property Podcast, right? And if we're looking at zones 4 or 5, on the outskirts of Richmond, where I live, we've been out looking, and it's almost impossible to get a viewing with an agent.
Really?
They're like, it's going to seal bids. It'll probably go 50 or 100 grand over the asking price. And my view on that is, out there, when I look at houses which are now approaching £1,000 a square foot in zone, whatever it is, 5 or 6, I'm not even sure if it's in a zone or out. It's like, hang on, you can buy right next to Hyde Park for a similar pound per square foot. This is not quite right. So my view on that is, I prefer to pay the stamp, right, and wait until the autumn at the end of the year. But the area that we're working, zone 1, 2, we are coming off a low base, and prices were significantly higher if you go all the way back to kind of 2015.
Oh, absolutely. Which was
there's a lot of headroom over the next
I agree.
5
I mean,
years
like even
Central.
before COVID, Central was really good value.
I
think Brexit was definitely factored in. It's like, remember the research we talked about a year and a half ago. If you were a US dollar buyer, just factor in the currency and the discount around 20% on average for prime Central. You're looking at nearly 40% discount in central London as a US buyer.
Which is crazy.
That's nearly half. It's absolutely nuts. So it was already really good.
I mean, we played on that a lot with our clients. Our clients are a lot very dollar based.
Going out there.
So a lot of it's playing on the dollar currency, and I think that window is like slowly closing. It's nearly it's nearly done. So it's a shame that whoever didn't take advantage of it hasn't done it. But
Do you normally advise for your clients to take out leverage against the property as well.
Always.
Because I would imagine
because leverage is cheap.
But also in relation to the pounds, they're getting more exposure to the pound if they're taking leverage.
Yes.
So yeah, I think it's quite a good the currency play on that.
A lot of our clients have got very good relationships with banks as well, and they they probably even get it cheaper than the rates that we're seeing on the high street. So but one thing that's really started to push our clients to get more deals done is, with regards to the stamp duty change on foreign buyers. I don't know. Have you guys seen that effect at all?
It's kind of
gone under the radar. Have you not?
Under the radar.
Yeah. Nobody's really mentioned it.
Yeah.
Well, unlike the UK stamp duty, everyone seems to know about it. Everyone reads the press.
Yes.
The international market, they don't even know. Unless they're advised by a solicitor, they don't seem to know.
Even myself, I forgot about it. And the only reason it came to my attention was because I had a sale going through, and they said it had to be done before the 31st. And we thankfully got it through on the 29th.
So long ago. And it's not really been talked about in the past kind of 6 months.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think we probably touched on it. If you look at the London property market, the UK buying property, holding property, your purchase cost is actually significantly lower than other global cities.
Correct. Yes.
Hong Kong, New York, Paris,
Singapore.
Right? Yes. Singapore.
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to that. I think a lot of these people we were talking about, 2%. Yes, it's going to be, if you're buying a £10 million property, it's going to be a big thing. But I think at that level, they're already looking at the value that London presents to them.
Yeah.
And I think a 2% increase, they can't do anything about it. They're not going to not play the London property game because they're addicted to it, let's say, right? Honestly, people are.
It's a culture thing.
Exactly. And it's like 2%, it's not great, but when you're a certain caliber, I think people don't really get affected by it too
but
much.
I do think that the reason why it hasn't been mentioned so much, and the reason why it hasn't kind of been brought to our attention more, is the reality is there ain't many international buyers around
right now,
and they're not kicking up a fuss because they're not actually in the transaction. They're not doing many transactions, and I think that's mainly what we've seen anyway. So you guys are on the ground. I'm sure you've seen
examples of what's interesting is a lot of these international buyers. We should be exchanging today, but a sale where we were one of the negotiating factors that we used to close the deal was the fact that you need to kind of wrap it up before 1st of April, because otherwise you'll be paying 2%, international buyers tax. And it came down to it, and actually she had a British passport, UK residence, and then it was like that completely wasn't relevant anymore. So a lot of the international buyers, if they've been in London or they have family, they actually have ways around it to actually not, if you're coming from overseas and it's the first time you're buying, you'll probably pay that. But you have to, from my experience, I've seen that where you think, oh, it's an international buyer, they don't live here, and then they have a UK home, they've got a UK passport, and you think, well, that doesn't apply to them. So that might be something.
Definitely.
Again, I think people play on that.
And also, a couple of the last two of the transactions that we've done with international buyers, they've actually purchased them in companies. Still, it's not as prevalent as it was, but the last two that we've done have, so that wouldn't make a difference because it's not going to change the company tax.
So there you go. Probably it was a big fuss when we came in. Remember, we were like, oh, all these international buyers are going to queue and go nuts.
This extra 2% is going to be a real dent in the market, and then we didn't see COVID coming in.
Exactly. That's true.
It kind of pales in comparison. We just think 2% more. What were we kind of worried about?
So it's quite interesting, isn't it?
It's just another hurdle for an international investor to take on board. That's what it really is.
I think they just have to take it on the chin.
Exactly.
And I think they're still motivated to take advantage of London, property right now.
For sure.
So have we covered everything then? I think
so.
The overall theme is certain areas very, very short on supplies, especially when it comes to properties to add value. If it's an end user, demographic with buyers and sellers, lots of activity. I think the budget, from my perspective anyway, and I'm sure you've seen it, buyers competing with each other, I think it's added a lot of fuel to already a strong fire. It will continue until June for sure. We're going to have a lot of busy weeks ahead, which is great. There's nothing better, honestly, telling someone's like, I'm fully booked on Saturday. You need to book it a week in advance. I'm really sorry. And that creates that momentum, and people really get even more excited. And it's not just us, it's literally every agent in the area. It is a bit different depending on where you are in central London, but I think the overall theme is that you do get more people who are actually ready to purchase a lot of competitive bids, as we've had in your example. And I think from a developer perspective, you need to have the right people ultimately to be able to source these properties, because you need to have connections ultimately, like the network, because you were speaking to 40 plus agents, and that's how you basically find stuff off market that's not going to go on the portals. So very, very busy market, I guess. And
definitely.
From different angles, it looks a bit different. You're struggling to find really good stock to add value to refurb. Your international market, I guess, is there, but not so much, and it'll probably come in later on in the year.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the domestic market is just crazy good right now.
Yeah. So I think I'm right in saying from going outside from the zone kind of 5 working its way, it feels like it's working its way inwards from rippling out rather from the centre in. It's kind of coming back that way. Yeah. And I know the house in Marylebone, the person that was buying it was just thought it was really good value over like the long term. And that's why it's now gone for like 100 grand more than what they were paying for it.
I mean, it's like what you said. I mean, you were out in Richmond and they were talking about 1,000 a foot. I mean, I'm buying things in St John's Wood for under 1,000 a foot at the moment. Yeah, that's crazy. So that's insane if you think about good value. But that's what it really is. I mean, I'm looking at it from an investor and thinking it's insanely good value. I mean, I looked at something in Ealing yesterday. Who an agent was trying to tell me it was a good deal, but he was trying to sell that to me for 1,000 a foot and saying that was a good deal.
Wouldn't find you buying a little house in Twickenham at £1,000 a foot.
No, you wouldn't. I'm a big fan of prime central London. I mean, for me, it represents extremely good value at this moment in time.
I completely agree. When you put it relative to where other parts of London are actually going towards, I completely agree.
And I think people who play in central London, buyers, sellers, they acknowledge the fact. I think a lot of people are coming to terms with that. Compared to maybe 2 years ago when we were saying to people, remember, we were saying to buyers, it's actually really good value. Like Brexit's been factored in, guys. Do it now. Obviously, stock was a big issue we had in central, but right now it's it just shows that the activity, people are just moving. They're taking decisions.
Haven't Savills come out with some research effectively like calling the bottom of the market?
Yes,
I'm sure
today.
I read something.
I just read it today. Well,
I can't remember what the headline was.
So
but
basically, central prime London is already bottomed out, and now they expect slowly
growth
to increase. Research came out after the budget straight away, saying we expect prime central London to grow by 20.3% over the next 5 years. That's prime central, and then the housing market about 21% in general as a UK. Again, just shows.
I think Knight Frank actually complement that same thing. So I think Savills were at 20, and I think Knight Frank were at like 17 point something. So I mean, I always say that to all my investors as well. It's the way you look at the market. You have to have a medium to longer term view, rather than a short term view. I mean, personally, I still think even in the short term, if you're bought right, you can sell right. So
you can still do it. But
it's just harder.
Exactly. But long term, I think it's as good value as it will be for a long time. So
but I think next year is supposed to be the year where you find the biggest increase. So 2022, I think, but based on those figures, was supposed to be like a 7 to 10% increase.
It'll kind of
exactly.
Hence, which is probably the reason why some of the clients are still kind of holding off. Would you say? Because we have got low stock levels at the moment. If they're reading those figures, thinking there's going to be a big increase next year, why sell?
If you can hold. If you've got no finance on the property, you can cover the costs, then you might as well put a tenant in, or
But the market has shifted. Like whilst we were in heavy COVID, the market was so much of a buyer's market. Now with all the competitiveness, you're finding that slowly it's becoming more of a seller's market.
I think it's still not a seller's market, but I think
it's getting there.
The shift is because when you've got 4 people wanting to offer on your property,
which is
you can play at a different level. Negotiate.
The lack of supply is making it.
That I agree. I've seen that as well. Come and put offers forward, and they're like, well, we'll just wait. And I'm like, okay, and then you get another offer, and it's like, fair enough, you played it well. So
those 2 examples are just
exactly, and
testament to that, really.
So
super busy. London property, I mean the UK market in general is very, very busy, I think, but obviously we're talking about London property market, prime central London, 100%, really good value. I think that the takeaway is, if you're thinking of buying, there's competition out there, but if you're not, you know, there's still, in different markets, sellers coming to the market. If you're a seller, now is the time to put your property on the market to sell 100%. You know, you've got a window to catch people who might want to catch the stamp duty holiday, but I think it depends again on the price range. That a lot of 15k max is not going to put people off that much.
And if you're waiting to buy, if you're thinking, well, I'll give it another year before I buy, you're
going to be paying a bit more.
You're probably risking. You're probably risking.
Yeah, I think they'll be paying a lot more, and it just shows what 3 weeks can do with a new budget. It just adds fuel to a fire. So if you're in the market to buy or sell, now is the time. There's no time like the present, right?
Exactly.
As they say.
Totally.
So I guess that's the takeaway. We'll be back probably in 2 weeks' time with maybe we'll do a different angle from a development point of view. You'll have to stay tuned to see what we're going to cover. But in the meantime, do subscribe and like us and share obviously the content on YouTube. You'll also find us on Apple Podcast and Spotify, which is super cool. So if you're driving to work, a daily commute, or working from home because there's no commute, then you can obviously tune in, get your information in regards to the London property market, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.